Oh,
Good.
she announced. She announced.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Gail Reed Barnett, the Professional Development Chair. I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to our webinar this evening by Dr. Elzie. As you can see, his information is there if you can read it. He's been our presenter for the last couple of weeks. Not to say that we don't have other people coming on. We will have this getting them set up for their time and date in order for them to present. So without further ado, I don't see my co-chair, Michael Gardner, but we will continue. Answering questions or questions and answers will be after the webinar. And Dr. Elzie, you may take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Barnett and Bob for having me here. I enjoy fellowshipping with school counselors. I'm actually preparing to go to Dallas for Lone Star State Association Conference this weekend. So glad to be here. My sessions are very interactive, so please feel free to unmute, navigate the chat box. I will be having some check-in points, so please dive in and don't be afraid to interrupt me, right? Because I'm here to support you and I want to make sure that your questions are answered throughout this webinar. I'm going to start sharing my screen. So today's topic focuses on strategic counseling practices to boost academic and social development. That is something that I find across multiple areas and regions that we are navigating now, where we're trying to ensure that we're supporting students in the whole child approach. Even more now than ever in this social political climate where every second, every minute, every millisecond, something can be impactful to the students that we serve. So I wanted to start with a check-in. So my check-in is, in one word, what does success mean for students in your school? You could blur it out, you could put it in the chat. When you think about success, what does that mean for your students in your school? One word. Zero improvement, resilient, graduation, achievement, progress, success. Growth. I like that. Progress and growth, those are sticking out to me, right? And we're going to kind of get into that a little bit more as we talk about reaching our goal, right? As we talk about today's topic and integrate some of those ask principles, because again, with the new ASCA model, they're focusing on growth and bridging the gap. And I know most states are. For example, I'm based in Louisiana, and that's something that the LD Department of Ed across the board, from academics to even school counselors, evaluations that we just revamped the rubric for, we're not focusing on attainment or achievement. We're focused on how we're moving Bob from point A to point B, right? And that is important. Attendance is another piece too that's important to this navigation of how do we define what success and behavior looks like in a school setting when students may not attend school or may attend school and not as attentive as they should be because of other barriers, right? So today we're going to apply Ask Online strategies across the MTSS tiers. We're going to utilize some data to address student needs and equity, and then we're going to look at how do you design academic and SEL supports for your multi-diverse learners in your school environments. So first we want to kind of talk about the basically the foundations of the whole child, right? So when you think about this, and as we start to talk about this whole child approach, I want you to answer this question. Which domain do you find most challenging to support consistently in your practice? A, academic, B, social emotional, C, both equal. Social emotional, B, A. Now I'm getting a mixture of just about both, right? Um, and that's important that we ask that question because oftentimes when we look at it from the whole child approach, we see how social emotional development is intertwined with academic achievement, right? And how you perform academically is a reflection on your social emotional uh, availability. So when we think about the whole child, we I went too fast. When you look at the whole child, right? This diagram reminds us that academic SEL efforts don't live in silos, as I just said, right? They're interconnected. And in order to achieve student success, we must look at all of those areas, right? From academic development, social emotional learning, and equity and belonging, right? Student success is multidimensional. We look at growth, and growth is connected deeply to how that individual, that student feels included, uh, a sense of belonging within that school. When we look at how academic interventions fall short when emotional regulation and motivation are not a part of the planning process, again, we lose students when they are not feeling supported or safe in that environment in order to thrive and participate and interact within that academic right. As a counselor, we're positioned in this unique role where we have to advocate, we have to coordinate, we have to design these systems to support the whole child. And when we lead these programs, we must integrate these domains for academic and social emotional. Our work touches all three of these circles, and in order to do that work, we have to ensure that we are navigating the space in our professional growth as well. One of my favorite phrases, you have to mask slow before you bloom, right? And for my educators, we know bloom is bloom text, not taxonomy, right? How we are teaching and creating assignments to navigate the learning process. But we know also Maslow is those hierarchy of needs, right? So basic needs before academic growth. We cannot expect students to focus on learning when they're not feeling safe. They are having food insecurities. They don't feel emotionally stable. So when these are unmet, then of course academic growth is unmet. We look at how emotional safety fuels cognitive engagement, right? So if I feel secure, valued, and supported in these environments, I'm more likely to take a risk in the academic world, right? Or I will, chance me having the wrong answer in class and being called out about it, right? All of these things is how we support and meet the needs of students emotionally so that they're able to navigate spaces beyond um, beyond their control. And lastly, of course, again, this whole child approach to education. We have to make sure that we're nurturing the well-being and the intellect. So just as much as we're focusing on grades, interventions, and having student support meetings, as far as academic rigor, we need to make sure that we are creating those same spaces for interventions at the level of social emotional development. Within the topic that we're talking about today, we know ASCA has 3 domains, but for today's topic, we're going to be talking about academic and the social emotional realm, right? When we look at academic development, we know that that supports enhances students' ability to learn by promoting self-directed learning and motivation. We want to ensure that through this domain, we are strengthening their organizational and time management skills. We are addressing barriers like attendance access and achievement gap. So how is attendance playing a huge role in attaining these academic endeavors? And supporting goals of critical thinking. As we look at the social emotional side of things, we want to help students manage emotions and relationships by building and incorporating emotional regulation and coping skills within our everyday lessons, our psycho ed lessons, within our counseling groups, within our whole system, so that students are familiar and comfortable with navigating their emotions. We want to teach responsibility and how to make responsible decisions. Right, that's very important. That's all fall under the social development. Foster positive communication and relationships, and also promote a sense of confidence and belonging in the space that they navigate. Those all are regulated based on feelings and how they feel within those certain contexts that comes with this territory. To help support that, ASCA has developed or has what we call student standards, and these are 6 mindsets and 29 behaviors. Right, mindsets reflect the beliefs we help students develop about themselves, and the behaviors fall into 3 categories: learning strategies, self-management, and social skills. And these how we guide our students and apply beliefs in real time. Right. When we think about learning strategies, we think about, okay, how can we support the student in taking these academic risks? How do we support them with studying? How do we help them with organizing and time management, planning, and ensuring that they are keeping up with their assignments? Self-management, how are we supporting them with self-regulation? How are we supporting them with persevering and pushing through and managing all of the intricacies of being a student within the school? And of course, social skills. How are they navigating space with their colleagues, with teachers, with staff, with faculty members, and how are they communicating their thoughts and feelings through the process? Which category do you think is most urgent in your school at this current moment? Academic, oh, and I'm sorry, but which behavior category, right? Learning strategies, self-management skills, or social skills. Which category do you believe is the most urgent in need of support at your current school? Self-management, self-management, social skills, self-management, self-management. And self-management is one of those that I would say is an anchor, right? Because if you navigate supporting the self-management and them regulating their emotions, their behaviors, and motivational capacities, you're able to build and extend into encourage them to support and create those goals within learning, or navigate and extend their selves into developing new friends within the social skills, right? So I think self-management and starting with self is very important. And it is important that we understand that as we continue to navigate, um, attain success, I guess, for our students. So when we think about that, getting to this sense of understanding and helping to support a student falls into what we call the multi-tiered system of supports, right? So we have tier 1, 2, and 3. Tier 1 is universal, the school-wide programs, classroom lessons. So we're going in the classrooms, teaching about time management techniques, teaching about tackling your emotions, right? Then we look at tier 2, where targeted support. So I see some students who need a little bit more extra in addition to tier 1. So we're gonna have like some small groups and talking a little bit more intentionally about certain aspects of these topics. And then we have those who fall under tier 3, where we look at, okay, maybe there's some individual needs that we need to support for those students. So providing wraparound service, sending referrals to community organizations. But it's important that we do understand that this is a continuum. Like it doesn't like transition, okay, I'm finished tier 1, I gotta go to tier 2. No. When you continue to provide these services at each level, you still are receiving the services that were provided to you prior to the level that you're in. So if you're in tier 2, you're still going to receive tier 1 services, but in addition to your tier 1 services, you receive those targeted supports and so on. So when we look at ASCA, so the ASCA behavior, mindsets, and standards, and we look at MTSS, the tier system, that creates a framework for success, right? Think of MTSS as the guide, that is the guide that provides the intensity and delivery of your work. Who needs what level of support and how often? But when you look at the mindsets and behaviors, these are defining what we're helping students develop. So, example, at tier 1, we're proactively teaching universal mindsets and behaviors through classroom lessons and school-wide programs. And as we move to tier 2, the focus become more targeted, perhaps a small group on struggling with motivation or peer conflict. Then at tier 3, we shift to individual supports and referrals, often addressing more intensive needs, like trauma response and crisis management, right? The delivery is the key, right? That just based on the student need. Still providing them the same content, it's just how it's delivered and provided to the student that becomes the difference. If you look at this kind of gives you an idea of what a tier template may look like when we look at behaviors in academics, right? So if you want to start at tier 1, you may look at the mindset of positive attitudes towards learning. So what behaviors are part of that? So maybe a learning strategy, teaching them about time management, study skills, self-management, teaching them about perseverance and social skills, how are they having respectful relationships? And then if you notice as each become more intensive, it stays in that continuum, but the delivery method becomes uh, different. We put more emphasis or more support into extending the learning from each tier. So how do we align interventions with ASCA standards, right? So we're gonna go through activity where we're gonna look at a couple scenarios. And I want you to, one, identify what level of support is appropriate. So it's tier 1, 2, or 3. And then which ASCA mindset of behavior would guide your intervention. I will put the mindsets in the chat, but if you cannot access them, use the skills that you have and support, and how would you support them in that manner. Again, there's no perfect answers. We just want to troubleshoot and consult with one another about how we can support students, right? So, in the chat, you can put your tier, so 1, 2, or 3, mindset or behavior, or just how you would move with working with this particular individual. So the first scenario that comes up, we have first. We have a fifth grader frequently forgets assignments, avoids reading out loud, and says school is too hard. Parent report he cries about school at home. So let's identify what tier do we need to focus on. Tier 1, 2, or 3, right? Here I have tier 2. And if anyone feels inspired to explain, or these may come off mute, that would be great as well. So I have a lot of tier 2s. Okay. Mindsets, right? So ask a mindsets. Let me see if I can. So when we look at ask a mindsets in this particular student, we have 6 of them. So we have, and I'll try to get them in the chat. So yeah. These are our 6 mindsets. So for this particular student, which mindset do you think would be appropriate for geometry? So is it mindset 2 and 4? Two and four, 2 and 4, 2 and 4. Okay, mindset 4. And then when we look at the behavior, this behavior more so learning strategy that needs to be employed, a self-management strategy that needs to be employed, or a social skills strategy that needs to be employed. Learning strategy, self-management, or social skills. Is it learning? Learning. Let's see what we have. Da, 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 da. Right. So likely this will be a tier 2 intervention. M4 is the best mindset, right? Self-confidence and ability to succeed. And a learning strategy, 3, which focus on time management, organizational, and study skills, right? So using this to help you narrow down and create specific interventions are key. These are why the mindsets in behaviors are created, so it helps you create your prescription, if you will, swift. Let's take a look at another scenario. So we want to look at the tier first. We have an 11th grader was recently suspended for fighting. He has a strong GPA, but says he snaps when disrespected. What tier of support do we need to intervene in? Bunch threes. Mhm. 1 and 3. Okay. Let's refer back to our mindset. Which mindset or mindset should we focus on with this student? Uh, Mindset 2. Mindset 2. Mindset 2. Okay. And then let's look at the behavior. Was this a self learning strategy, self management, or a social skill that needs to be intervened? All right. See what we have. All right. So likely it's a tier 3 because it's individualized. This is something that's individually affecting him and his individual responses to the situation. We also looked at it can be possibly M1, belief in development of whole self, including healthy balance of mental, social, emotional, and physical well-being. Um, and then we look at self-management and employing effective coping skills. So how do you support him in responding effectively when being quote unquote disrespected instead of snapping off and being uh, redistributing that behavior as well. All right. I think I have one more. All right. We have a second grade student, shows no behavior concerns, but rarely engages in class or group activities and prefers to work alone. What tier? Tier 1. All right. What about our mindsets? What mindsets are we focusing on here? So mindset 4, and we have someone who put in the behavior of social skills. Mindset 4, social skills, and you can start if you have an idea of the behavior strategy that we need to employ. What type of strategy would that be? Learning, self-management, social. All right. I have one social and the other disagreements. All right, drum roll. Boom, boom, boom. So this is likely either 1 or 2. Um, right? Because we're looking at the class and group, right? Class is becomes tier 1, and small groups, of course, is a target group, so it becomes tier 2. Working on sense of acceptance, respect, support, and inclusion for self and others in the school environment. Right? And then, of course, social skills, positive relationship with adults to support success. That's how we would possibly intervene, right? I know many of y'all say M4. M4 focuses on self-confidence and ability to succeed. I don't necessarily know if she's not confident that she could succeed. It's just she prefers to work in her own space, right? So she may be confident I can succeed, by myself, right? So definitely um important to keep that in mind as well. So when we think about these may be some common scenarios that come up in your schools that you may face, that you may have experienced and have to navigate. Always having the resource of the asker mindsets and behaviors on that can easily help you create rapid interventions to utilize. A lot of times, how do we get to understand and get to these scenarios, and get to these cases? It's important as well because we have to have the evidence support to navigate that space. And that's where data comes. How are we using data for equity and access? How are we using data to drive this process of supporting our students? When we think about when all data is combined, inequities are often hidden, right? When we begin to break that down and look at data in its own pieces, we see that that's where we are able to see who is being underserved, where the gaps are, what systems need to be changed, what is academic performance, attendance, behavior. Data help us move into this realm of intentionality instead of, oh, I think this will work, so let's try this, and if it don't work, we'll find something else, right? No, listen to the data so that you are able to create informed decisions on which intervention and strategies that you're going to employ when working with your students. As school counselors, we focus on 3 types of data. process, perception, and outcome. When we think about process data, this is what did you do and for who, how many students. So you're tracking your services that you deliver, the number of lessons, groups, and individual sessions that you're able to, that you encounter, demonstrating the scope of your work. For example, serve 120 students in a 6-week anxiety group will be process data for you, right? We move to perception data. What do students or partners believe or feel about feel after your interventions, right? So after you go into classroom, after you go into your sessions and actually provide the service, what are your beliefs and what are the students' beliefs and perceptions about what has happened, right? This is where we're capturing the knowledge and attitude and skills through surveys, reflection tools, exit tickets, so that we're able to continue to inform the work that we are navigating. So an example of this data will be 85% of students reported feeling more confident resolving conflict after a classroom lesson. And then we move to our outcome data, right? What tangible changes happening in student behavior performance, right? So we want to show measurable impact in academics, attendance, and behavior. So when we look at that example, would be 30% decrease in behavior referrals after targeted tier 2 intervention. So after I did a series of targeted tier 2 interventions, I noticed that referrals started to uh, decrease. That is your outcome. That is part of what you want, right? I want referrals. I want suspensions. I want this to decrease. So this is the outcome data that I'm receiving based on my process and perception data. We're going to take a look at some data points, and I want you all just to reflect honestly on your initial thoughts about it, and then we'll come back collectively and look at the data all together. So let's take a look at this data. Our suspension rates by race and ethnicity at a particular school. As you is looking at this data, what comes to mind? What are your initial reactions, reflections, thoughts? Um, Welcome to again unmute yourself or use the chat. But I want to hear what your thought processes are when you look at this data chart. What was the makeup of the school first? Urban school setting. Any other reflections and thoughts? Students of color are suspended at higher rates. What does this say about the school culture, climate, or their biases at play? All right, let's don't see the chart. Could be urban or suburban, but we would need more to know more demographic of the school. All right, let's take a look at some more data. This is another chart. Now I'm gonna look disproportionate, okay? Suspicion rates are low for those that claim to be Asian descent. So now we look at the access for tier 2 counseling supports by gender. When we look at this data, what is this telling us? What are your thoughts? What are your reactions? Assumptions, right? So these are targeted supports. Any thoughts on this data? We want to know the gender breakdown. Gender breakdown as far as like male need slightly more intervention than females, but we don't know the ratio of students of the school. Okay. Males need more support. We want to transition to another data set. Let's look at this. So this is SEL competency scores by sub. So we got the subgroup of ELL students, students with IEPs, Black students, white students, and multiracial students. When we look at this, what are our thoughts? So this is competency level. So this is saying that quote unquote students are performing appropriately for um their age level within this SEL competence. Mhm. And I like some of our students with IEPs appear to be to struggle most, right? Which we can say that can be a integrated kind of hypotheses in the beginning, but also we have students with IEPs, they're at a tier 3, right? So with tier 3 students, you should be receiving targeted group services and whole school services in addition to your individualized service. So you have more support to help you get to quote unquote that competent level. So what is that also saying about how services are being provided at the school, right? Who published the assessment used or their biases, right? I definitely want to see assessment too. And then our last set of data is average GPA by student group. So we have ELL students, SPED students, general ed students, and gifted students. So when we put all of this together, right, it's good. We look at it in silos. We create these right, the individual questions, these individual assumptions and ideas, and that's usually how data is presented in its own separate silo, right? But from our perspective as school counselors, we have to look at data separately and collectively. So when we look at this data all together, we're able to make some comparison, right? So we see that, all right, we have a high rate of Black students who are being suspended, but then we also have a high rate of males who are receiving tier 2 supports. So is there a relationship there, right? Is that something we need to target, right? Also, we have a high rate of Black students who are being suspended, but we also have a median rate of students who are quote unquote competent in the SEL screener, right? So what do we need to do there to support those students? How do we create these interventions to ensure that we are putting these equitable practices in place, right? And then that could be an assumption that there's a correlation between the males receiving targeted to students who may be Black that are having issues with achieving competent SEL schools, right? So as school counselors, we still have to look at the data across all of the divisions, right? So understanding what is being represented, who is being represented, who has been underrepresented. What are we looking at as far as which tier interventions could address some of these gaps, right? Are there any cultural or structural shifts that we have to make? So when we look at this, how do we get past just looking at the data, dissecting the data, and leaving it there, right? We have to be more responsive. We have to uh, connect the dots so that we're able to support our students holistically. So as we are coming towards the end of time, I want you all to consider the idea of what would you do if this was the data that was presented at your school. This was the school that you were at, and this was the data that was coming through the pipelines. How would you support that and advocate for those students, right? With that, I want to open it up to a question as a closing check-in, check-out. What data point resonates with your school, and what's one step you can take to respond to it? So currently, in your capacity, or where you're at, what is a data point that resonates with you, and what is one step that you are taking or would like to take towards navigating that space? And I like that you put that in there, Rob, because that could also be a response as a counselor too, is you present me with this information, but I don't have all of the information to make decisions. So my first move would be to, okay, we need to either find more data or create more data. So maybe there's some other assessment tools that we need to find to employ so that we're able to get a better picture holistically of what's really transpiring, but also in the meantime, while you're doing that, what can you do at the tier 1 level to navigate that space so that you're not falling between the cracks as you wait for more data, if you will. Because sometimes if you look at that and say, oh, I see that suspensions are happening at a higher rate, right? So I don't think that data is 100% correct, but I do see that we do have a high rate of suspension. So let's do some conflict resolution cycle ed classroom lessons as we navigate getting more in-depth data. And part of that during those lessons will be right getting data as well. On being on those male student student counseling services, how many are black males who seem to have high suspicion rate. Uh, Olivia said that access culture, climate, restorative practice, uh, is a data point that resonates with her at her schooling, their schooling. So you started restorative justice circles, yes, right. And that is one thing we as educators have to get in the mindset of re-entry and restoring relationship, right? How do you expect a student to return after being suspended for multiple days to a setting and interact with an individual who may have written them up and then expect them to dive right back into work and then miss so many days, right? So, setting up those plans, those support plans, so that they're able to re-enter the school environment effectively. So I'll leave you with a strategy to where like you get to this point, right? Choosing an academic or SEL need at your school and designing a tier 3 strategy, right? So based on this academic need or SEL need, what can be some tier 1 interventions I can lead? What are some small group interventions? What are some individual support and referral sources and resources I can navigate so that I'm able to create comprehensive plans for supporting students? And utilizing the ASCA mindsets and behaviors are key as well, because they help guide and help create that language that is necessary to garner the partners and individuals who need to be at the table. Here are some examples of some general examples of how we can intervene at these levels from tier 1, tier 2 to tier 3 to support students in their social development and academic success. So, having study skills bulletin, missing work check-ins, so developing that process. Restorative circles, somebody said that, right? Friendship lessons, check-ins, individual check-ins, family and school coordination, re-engagement, lunch bunch, right? Identity affirming lessons. So all of these are key strategies to developing and supporting the academic and social emotional development of students within a school. As counselors, just remember that you are the bridge between the student potential and student success, right? The student is investing in you to provide them and support them as they walk down the road to attain success. And we are there to help provide those resources and direction so that they are able to make it to their destination. These are some resources I'll leave with you to look into, right? The Practical Handbook on Multi-Tier System Support, the School Counselor's Guide to Multi-Tier System Support, Operational Cultural Competency and Equity Work in Schools. A lot of our ASCA school counselors are authors in this book, and this is a new book that recently came out. And Building Resilience in Students Impacted by ACEs, right? which is part of a lot of the work that we do. A lot of our students come in with who have experienced ACEs on top of generational trauma and how to navigate and combat those are key into them achieving Maslow so that they can bloom and learn and feel safe and secure within the school setting. And I thank you. I leave my contact information for you all. If you need to contact me, I will be sending these slides over so that you can have them as a resource. Any questions, comments, or concerns, I'll take those.
Thank you, Dr. LZ. This is Dr. Reed Barnett on your presentation. I'm a member of ASCA, so I understand the ASCA model and all that other good stuff. But how do you get the parents to buy into what we're doing as school counselors? Because we need their involvement as well in order for this to happen. Yes, kids are in school 8 hours, 7.5 hours a day, but remember when they go home, they forget all about or maybe they may not forget what they learn in school. How do we keep parents involved so they can help their students? Remember, it's all of us together. It's the whole village, in terms of children's academic studies. So that's why I put it involve the parents, have a conference with the parents, and you need parent support.
That's something that's the $1 million question, right? And through my own experience and research, I find that with this generation of students, they are the parents. They're making the decisions because their parents want to be the friend and they want to live their best life too. So I don't see you as a parent. I see you as a friend or a sibling, right? So we have to get back to holding parent, and that's the other thing. We don't really hold parents responsible because now you charging you as adults, right? So the level of responsibility has to still fall back on the parent at some point. And it really doesn't, right? Even with child protective services, right? It at least my experience in Louisiana, it takes an arm, leg, and 2 eyebrows for them to intervene in a situation, whether or not it's serious or not. But that, so the idea that when are we going to hold parents responsible for parenting their students, right?
That's that $1 million question.
I often said that, that need to be a parenting require that if you don't go to parenting classes, what have you, and get a certificate when that baby is born, that baby becomes a member of the state, which then also creates this other pathologized trajectory. So, like I said, we have to come together and be more communal and collective. But again, we want community, but then we still want our individuality, and we want it when we want it, in a sense. So we gotta get back to ensuring that parents are responsible and they are consequence with the actions of their students.
Okay. Any more questions?
And I think that also can be a part as too as schools holding like family engagement nights, because sometimes you really gotta teach parents how to parent. Right? This is what you could do. This is how you can do it. What have you, and just creating that relationship with those individuals can also support in this endeavor as well.
Okay. Any other comments?
Thanks, Dr. Elsie.
Thank you. I know that you
And
are getting ready for conference, right?
Yes, hopefully we'll see you there. If not, there's always next year.
Yeah, yeah, I think I'm gonna prioritize next year because October was really busy for me, and
Mhm.
I have to slow down for November and December.
Okay, we had a decent turnout. We had like 38, 33 people online, so that was good. So thank you, school counselors, for attending. Those of you that attended, our operations manager, Dr. Bob Rotunda, will be sending out certificates. Please tell your colleagues to look out for our next presentation, which we will send out shortly. And a sidebar, for those of you that live in the 5 boroughs, don't forget to vote on November 4th. We will be having a new mayor. And thank you to the councils that attended. I see a couple of board members. Christine Curcio is here this evening. Beth Girardi, a shout out to the NISCA board members that I see on here. If there aren't any questions, if you celebrate Halloween, enjoy, be safe. Don't eat any candies. I understand the candies are looking, they have the same name, but the ingredients are different. So be very
Right.
careful on those candies if you're taking your children trick-or-treating or if you're going to go out to a party. So thank you again for coming. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Gail.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay.
Okay. Trick or treat.